You determine how much masturbating you do.
You're ready to be premature all over again.
Wow, that's impressive.
Quick
bro.
reset.
Yeah.
Quick reset.
Yeah, that's right. Licking gin balls.
It's just going to be a vicious cycle.
Who knew the job was pro bono?
I was so high that I shit myself at some point.
Okay, get still here. Somebody, everybody mute. Goddamn, you're killing me.
Joke's on you. It's actually addicting.
There's nothing wrong with punching above your weight.
To play with you.
better. Well,
I don't know what's
also-
worse. You're a ginger or you've been vaccinated.
You sit around and drink and solve the world's problems, right?
Hey, let's go ahead and unwrap this present
So,
and let the debate begin.
Welcome back to another episode of A Spirited Debate. We got a good one for you today, so stick around. We're going to jump into that in just a second. But as always, let's start with how is everybody doing today?
Good.
Really good. Fair to middle.
I swear, your energy week in and week out, it's astonishing. I don't know how we do it. But Grinch, glad you didn't blow your load too early this time. Gonna need you for the full run today. This one's a good
It's a
one.
serious topic. I got to pace myself.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Like you're drinking,
Yes.
which you didn't do last night. Pace yourself.
Yeah. Wait, what did we do?
We
last
played.
night?
We played last night. Yeah, we definitely have an interesting episode. Obviously, we're going to jump into our drinks, but before we get started, season 2, we talked about having guests on the show. We have our first guest of season 2. Excited to have them here. Grinch, I know you have a connection with the guest today, so I'm going to let you introduce our guest before we jump into the drinks. So let's go ahead and get started.
Yes, I'd like to introduce my hetero life mate. So Jason and I think have known each other over 20 years now. We started out as lieutenants together in the Army and went to the 82nd, and then touching on the topic we're going to get to, September 11th happened. That led to a whole series of events that brought us into Afghanistan, which I know we'll probably get into in terms of the why were we there. But since then, definitely Jason has stayed very connected to Afghanistan, and is certainly hyper connected right now given current events. And yeah, Jason, I'll turn it over to you in terms of kind of highlighting your experience over there and connectivity to the issue.
Jason, is it painful knowing a ginger for 20 years?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, you don't want to admit that to anybody, do you? I get it.
But he's got to get down, so I tolerate.
And to keep your soul that long.
That's right. I've almost got his soul.
Well, you notice how we all start looking older and he just looks the same age, right?
That's right.
Just sucking their soul.
He's rubbing carrots on his head. That's how he keeps that.
He got to see the beautiful locks in person today.
Nice.
It's glowing. It is.
Yeah,
That's it. I didn't mean to interrupt, Jason. I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay. So I went to Afghanistan in 2002 with the 82nd Airborne Division, and then I ended up staying there when they came home. And I worked at the embassy with a guy named Carl Eikenberry. He was a 2-star general. And our job was to build the Afghan army and help them build their national security system so that America could leave. I mean, that was the overarching mission. That was the first real mission I had in Afghanistan. And I met, I had weekly meetings with President Ghani, who stepped down today. I grew up with Amrullah Saleh, the vice president, who's probably going to continue fighting on in some other capacity today. Abdullah was the foreign minister, and he's taken over the transitional government, leading that effort today. So I kind of grew up around all the folks that are in power at this moment and heading out of power. And so my career kept bringing me back into it. Eikenberry went back as the ambassador, as a civilian. I went back with General McChrystal, and we refigured how we do it for the Obama administration. And then I was involved in it during the Trump, and then during the transition to Biden. Worked on it as well. And I've stayed in touch with all the Afghan people I've worked with over the years. I mean, I literally have most of Kabul on my WhatsApp right now. And I'm just, their messages are just pouring in and out of my phone all morning and all night. So it's been a pretty emotional ending to 19 years of friendships going on over there.
Wow. Holy shit. I guess with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you now know our topic for the day. We're actually going to be discussing Taylor Swift's best albums, and hopefully his resume will be beneficial to that topic. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and talk about our drinks. Jason, you're the guest on the show, first guest of season 2. I'm going to start with you. What are you drinking today?
My favorite Scotch, Monkey Shoulder. Inexpensive, tastes real good. Good Speyside mix of stuff. You can always get it. So that's my go-to Scotch when I don't have a lot of money.
And you are drinking it neat for anyone that can't see. It's just Scotch in a glass. Easy peasy.
Scotch in a glass, an old Jason Howk glass. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Grinch, since you were kind enough to bring our guest to the table, what did you make for a drink today? The tier, you muted yourself again. That's twice. Third time, and we're booting you, and Jason's taking over.
I went mute so I wouldn't interrupt. Yeah, so this is the
20 years of tears. That's what it is.
Hawaiian Gold Rush. I couldn't remember if anybody had done a Gold Rush. This is a Hawaiian spin on it, which, is bourbon, honey syrup, lemon juice, fresh pineapple juice. And it calls for 2 dashes of grapefruit bitters, which I didn't have. But yeah, it's good. Easy drink.
Nice. So you didn't go with the Trinidad sour.
No, I thought about it, but man, I mean, an ounce of bitters.
What kind of bitters? What kind of bitters?
It's Agnostra for those of you that are not literate in the English language.
Thank you, Agnostra bitters. Yeah, I thought that's what you come to the table with. So obviously surprised that you made
I thought about it, man. I'm intimidated.
Can't do it.
I'm intimidated by an ounce of bitters.
Understood. Haas, what about you, brother? What did you bring to the table today?
So we're continuing to barrel down on the gin train, and I don't think anyone's tried this yet. I'm doing a gimlet, some Hendrick's gin, some lime juice, and some simple syrup.
Easy peasy.
And there you have it. Yeah.
I got something that I don't know that you may not be able to get. My dad just got it. I tried it this morning while I was there. It is a non-alcoholic gin substitute. I can't remember. I'll have him send a picture. I'll forward it on to you.
Okay.
And because he loves gin and tonics, loves the flavor, but obviously doesn't need the buzz of the alcohol. It's a natural botanical version of gin,
Solar
but without
made.
the alcohol. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll have to get the name of it, but interesting flavor by itself. He hadn't tried it by itself. Super interesting flavor. I'm not sure I could handle that. It definitely has to be mixed with something. But like if you were going to do something non-alcoholic related, it might be a good substitute for you.
There's no
I
risk
know
of
why,
that.
right? Why
There's
would I
no
do
risk
that?
of that. No.
Nice. So you're
Unless my doctor tells me I have to. And even then, there's a 50-50
And
shut
then I'll
up.
punch him in the face.
That's right. Like you said,
while
what?
drinking alcohol.
You wanna, yeah, this is not bad.
Slides $10 across the table.
That's right.
What did you say?
That's it. Exactly.
That's
All
what I
right.
can afford.
So
Yeah.
I will go. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say I've never had one before. This is I would say gimlet's it's pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad.
Has gin become your new Crown Royal?
I mean, I'm really, really liking it right now for sure.
I mean,
So,
because if you don't need a fan, you've always got gin.
yeah,
Air
it's true.
conditioning. Don't need air conditioning when you've got gin.
No, I think we need both.
Okay. There's a balance. All right. So we'll move on to me. I did a gin and tonic last week, and I thought I would do something similar this week. I bought a new bottle of Terramana tequila, the Reposado. And so I am trying a tequila and tonic, which is obviously just a gin and tonic, but with tequila. So super refreshing, super clean, easy to drink. It's actually quite tasty. And I think this is definitely something that I would put in the rotation on a regular basis. So that's what I'm doing, tequila and tonic. And then finally, Mac, you are not supposed to be here today. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and your voice. It's like butter. What are you drinking? Go ahead and close us out. What are you drinking?
All right. So first of all of T Swizzle's albums are fantastic. You can't pick just one. Okay. So to answer your question there,
There's no debate. We'll move on.
Exactly. So yeah, no, as you mentioned, I had not planned on being here. When I saw the text going back and forth, and I saw Grinch's passion for this topic, and knowing that we're going to have hopefully a fantastic guest on in Jason, I'm going to learn a lot of stuff from him, I think, today, because as we mentioned, I bring the ignorant American
Perspective
to this. So I was really looking forward to this. Unfortunately, having not planned and being out of town right now, as 3/5 of us know, you can't buy liquor on Sunday. So
Fucking
in North Carolina. So I had to kind of punt and decided to just go with a local beer. So I went with a Wilmywood Wilt, which is a Belgian wheat. Brewed
It was a
locally
tongue
here
twister.
I know, right? Brewed here in Wrightsville Beach. So that's what I'm drinking today.
honestly, when you see it, it says will my wood. And I just assumed it's like if you drink it, you're just willing the wood to do something. But you corrected
Well,
my
I can show you later.
pronunciation.
You know, on a side Zoom call. I'm sure
Gotcha,
not everybody wants
gotcha.
that.
Let me open that window real quick.
You're going to need a couple windows.
Fair enough. All right. So obviously been around the room. Again, Jason, thank you for joining us, taking the time out of your day to educate us lowly moronic Americans on this topic. Super excited. Looking forward to it. Obviously to you gentlemen, I say cheers. Hope for a good show.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
And let's jump in.
Roast.
All right, Grinch. So as Max said, you brought this topic to the table kind of last minute. You and I had a discussion, a quite in-depth discussion. And so I'm going to let you kind of start us off where we're going, the direction that we want to go for this. Obviously, you brought Jason to the table, who obviously has a shit ton of background with Afghanistan, the Middle East, this particular situation. So we're going to start there. The topic is obviously I won't call it the fall. I guess you could call it the fall of Afghanistan. Jason, correct me. At this point, from our perspective, it is the fall of that country into the hands of not the Afghanistan.
The fall of the republic into the hands of a extremist group. Yeah,
it's like a modern day Star Wars right here on Earth in Afghanistan. It's the fall of the republic. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. There is going to be a lot to unpack here. So please stay with us, stay engaged. Again, if you are the average American, you're probably not tied to this a great deal. There's going to be a learning curve for some of this that maybe weren't even aware we were still in Afghanistan. Definitely interested to see what happens. But Grinch, I'm going to let you jump us off where we're at, what questions we're asking, and then let's just dive into it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I'll just say for the benefit of those that don't know, we went into Afghanistan following September 11th, 2001. And at the time, that was the first deployment. Iraq had not started yet. We went into Afghanistan with CIA and special forces, linked up with the Northern Alliance. Al-Qaeda had assassinated Massoud at that point, and Jason, certainly correct me on anything I get wrong, but steamrolled the Taliban out of Afghanistan I shouldn't say out, but out of power. And for those that don't know, we've been there ever since. In some form or fashion, the troop levels have gone up, gone down, the number of nations participating, what role, whether we were in lead or follow, doesn't necessarily matter. The point is we've been there since. And I think, was it Tuesday, Jason, that President Biden made the announcement? Am I getting that date right? I know it was just recently that we were withdrawing.
Yeah, it's been in the last couple of weeks. He put out yesterday. He put out a statement to the effect of that's it. We're washing our hands. It's on you.
And then if you do have news feeds, what you probably started to see was just this one after another of this city has fallen, this city has fallen. And then we learned today that the president was being evacuated, if that's the right term. And the Taliban, who initially were going to hold outside of Kabul to negotiate, went ahead and pressed in based on assessing that there was a vacuum of leadership there / taking control. So you could say, as was in one of the statements from the president, we've been there for 2 decades ish, spent over $1 trillion, and untold number. Well, there is probably a number that's out there for a number of injuries or casualties, and certainly the Afghan people have paid a heavy price in this process, and that all evaporated within a matter of days, and that's where we are today. And it begs the question of, so what does this mean? Where do we go from here? Is this our modern day Vietnam? Is kind of the setup for the topic.
So Jason, I would ask, with what he just said, your connection to Afghanistan and the Middle East, how do you view this particular situation? Because obviously you do have a connection that the average American doesn't have. You're aware of things on a level the average American is not aware of. So when you are hearing the news, you're seeing these messages come across your phone. What's going through your head in terms of what you said at the beginning when we introduced you, what you've done since you've been there, who you've worked with, the discussions that you've had, the game plans that you guys have tried to put in place to make the Afghanistan country a viable option or entity unto itself. What are you thinking when this is occurring?
And there was a book that came out not too long ago, and it's from a statement that a lot of people have made over the years. In Afghanistan, we fought the wrong enemy, and that was the real problem, and that is what's led us here today. All of this has been orchestrated by Pakistan, who is the neighbor of Afghanistan, who hates Afghanistan and uses Afghanistan and their paranoia against India as a back door, a back lot. I can get away from my neighbors in the strategic depth of the country next door because they're poor and they don't have a big army, and we can use them whenever we need to. So that's what the real problem has been. We had our sights on the wrong thing the whole time, and Pakistan spent 20 years figuring out how to take over the country the second we left. So as soon as Biden announced we were leaving and talked NATO into leaving, they just set their plan in motion. And it is almost the same plan they used in the 1990s when they first put the Taliban on the ground and ran them in through Afghanistan to take over the country. So we had our eye on the wrong thing, and nobody would dare to look at what we really should be doing. And we just kind of got lost in every other job you can think of in South Asia, except for dealing with Pakistan. And they knew it. Pakistan knew they had the entire world over a barrel and just waited for us to leave. I mean, they told us that when I got there in the beginning. Don't build a big army. It's a waste of money. We'll wait for you to leave. You'll leave. We did.
Because you will get tired of spending money and resources in this environment, in this region. And ultimately you'll pack your bags and go. And then like you said, we'll occupy the vacuum that exists when you're gone.
That was pretty much Pakistan's plan for 20 years, and they did it. And the Afghans feel completely betrayed because we spent 20 years stomping around in Afghanistan, accidentally killing civilians while we were chasing the Taliban and other terrorists, and never lifted a finger to make Pakistan change their foreign policy view and stop fueling the Taliban. So Pakistan got away with it. China's their big buddy. So China's laughing right now. Russia is on that side. Told us at the beginning, we're going to make this miserable for you. We're just going to make you want to quit. So Iran, Russia, China, Pakistan, all celebrating today. You literally go on social media. Those nations are celebrating the end of our superpower. They have depths of evil, and they unleashed it.
Mac, I apologize. I know I spoke over you. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to ask. So why do you think we did not focus on Pakistan and focused on the Taliban instead? I mean, I feel like over the course of 20 years, somebody, should have said, wait a minute, maybe we are fighting the wrong enemy. I mean,
well, based on what Jason said, when they first got there, obviously that was said at some point, right? So again, I understand the point.
I've asked that question because I've known that answer was the answer in 2002. I've asked that to, I've been involved in the policy making piece of 4 different administrations now. And I've brought up the question every time. And it's the question Afghans ask every time. Oh, you got a new policy? Does it involve stopping Pakistan from protecting Al-Qaeda, protecting Haqqani, protecting ISIS, protecting the Taliban? Literally, they have towns that they've set aside to keep the Taliban safe. They have training centers. That's where they buy the ammonium nitrate to make the IEDs. That's where they get all their weapons. Like, are you going to do anything about that? And our State Department, our intelligence community just said, we don't want to go there. It's a nuclear armed country, and we've got kind of a friendship with them, even though they're a frenemy, and we don't want to go there. And in the end, the Afghans were right in their assessment that we cared more about Pakistan than we did Afghans. So 20 million women just got locked in their houses today.
And Afghanistan, I know that Grinch, the thing you sent out about Biden, like training their military and things like that, arming them to prepare them. I'm sure, Jason, probably part of your plan over the last 20 years in terms of working with Afghanistan and the different administrations was trying to formulate a plan on how to turn over control to the Afghans themselves. Were they never in a position to confront Pakistan? I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know enough about Pakistan, but they could never do it themselves? Because
we spent how much money and how much technology, state-of-the-art technologies over there? How many troops did the Afghan army have?
They got up to about 300,000 in the end between army and police, but all designed to keep security inside Afghanistan. never designed to fight against Pakistan. So it wasn't, and they're a small, it's the size of Texas with 36 million people. Pakistan's coming up on 200 million people, and they've got 2 mega cities, over 10 million each. So Afghanistan just, they don't want to have a war with Pakistan,
so
but they don't like each other.
Yeah. So that was my question. Even with the training and the technology, they could never stand up against Pakistan. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Grinch, you made the comparison right out of the gate. Is this our modern day Vietnam? Go ahead.
I mean, yeah. And Jason and I spoke about this earlier, and, I mentioned this last night. There was a great book called A Better War that looked back on Vietnam, and it discussed how between policy, a strategic plan, having the right people in place, and then resourcing and support, like Vietnam never had all those in alignment. Unfortunately for the United States, that seems like a recurring theme, because, it's not that we didn't put some of our best and brightest minds, against the Afghanistan problem. I mean, General Miller, who's been there, almost 3 years, I think.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, he's literally lived in another country for 3 years, and he used to command JSOC. Like he is a sharp dude. By the way, he was also on the ground in Mogadishu during Black Hawk Down, to give you a sense of how long he has been in the business. And it just didn't. It just never took hold. And I think what I heard Jason say is, like, it was a plan implemented with in earnest, with good faith, in the sense of like all the people trying to implement it. But what I think I heard is it was always doomed to failure because it was the wrong plan. And it begs the question of how could we not have seen that? And, we talked about the frenemies, which we've got more than one. Turkey comes to mind, of somebody who's supposedly an ally, who fucked us numerous times. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't get what we're waiting for, of when this is supposed to pay dividends, as opposed to just avoiding saying the tough things and being a superpower.
Right.
Well, in that kind of what Biden was getting at is we've been at this for 20 years. His 4 administrations, and he didn't want it to be a 5th. He wasn't going to hand us over to a 5th administration. I mean, we're done. The experiment's over. We tried. It didn't work out. I mean, essentially,
that's what he said. I mean, when he was given the offer to do the right thing and sanction Pakistan and change their foreign policy, he said, "I don't want to do it either." Basically, I'm going to go with, I'm going to complain about what the other presidents did, but I'm going to do the same thing they did, and I'm going to leave.
Why is everybody afraid of Pakistan? Is it the China-Russia connection?
It's a frenemy, and they have nuclear weapons, and they will threaten us constantly that, hey, if something happens to us, a bunch of terrorists are going to get these nuclear weapons. We don't want to lose control of them. We're more worried about losing track of some weapons that probably don't even work at this point. They built them so long ago that we won't confront them. I mean, they hid bin Laden. They kept him alive in their country. They housed the Taliban leadership. There's probably 30 terrorist groups along that border, and they train all the young boys in that country to join one of those terrorist groups that they can. They have schools where they just brainwash them by the thousands at schools, where they just create this cannon fodder to join terrorist organizations. Yeah, so that they can terrorize South Asia.
What are the names of the schools that are super fundamentalist?
I don't know.
Madrasa?
It's a madrasa. It's a term for a school, but it's a religious school.
Yeah.
Theirs are just ramped up and amped up, and they have been for decades. So the world doesn't want to get involved in trying to unscrew Pakistan. And when Ambassador Eikenberry was picked in 2009 by Obama to go over there, this was my old boss. I just sent him a note, and I said, "We'll never fix Afghanistan if we don't fix Pakistan first. So good luck as the ambassador." And I was there a few months later by name. "Hey, you're coming to Afghanistan." But
how'd I get
no
pulled
one
into this
wanted
shit?
to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Grinch, because you made the correlation to Vietnam. And I want to ask Jason, from your perspective in just a second, if you agree with that assessment. But when you talk about Vietnam, I think that conjures up a very specific picture. I know that's pre our generation in terms of it occurring. That's our parents' generation. But my grandfather was an engineer in the Marine Corps, and he was actually commissioned by the MACV, which was the Military Assistance Command Vietnam, in '62 to go to Vietnam because he dealt with logistics and, bridges and all of those things. And so it was like, we want you to go. And for 50 months, he was in Vietnam and wrote a memo after touring all of northern South Vietnam, airfields, roads, things like the infrastructure. Like, could we put our military in country and be successful? And after 15 months in country, he wrote a memo saying, if we get in a war in Vietnam, we're going to lose. We're going to be there 10 years and ultimately we'll accomplish nothing. Ultimately, in '65, we went to war. We were there 10 years and we accomplished nothing.
Feels like Cassandra, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so, obviously my connection to that situation, because my grandfather was there, with his connection saying, is this our modern day Vietnam? And your connection and approach to Afghanistan, do you agree with his assessment? Because I think, like, when you say Vietnam, people immediately go, I get it. We were there for 10 years, 50,000 plus soldiers died. And we go, and for what? We were never going to win that war. It was a war of attrition. We could never win because it was fought in an entirely different way. Do you agree that sorry, what?
I was just going to say, if I can unpack that a little bit, you're touching on what I'm getting at. It isn't the failure is the failure in the sense that we know the outcome. And now we have that to assess these statements against. It was a lack of understanding of what really mattered on the ground, is probably a key truth there.
Right.
It was a, superpower basically using another force. Now, at the time, we believed we were stemming communism. That was we always seem to have one big theme, right?
Global
that keeps
communism,
us in a place, right?
Yep.
And then it was a whole series of mistakes in terms of policy when we started limiting our forces. And, and it's not that our forces didn't fight well. I'll use the Tet Offensive. If you look at the statistics of what happened in the Tet Offensive, by all accounts, we kicked their ass. But it was a huge IO information operation, if you will, loss. And granted, our mainstream media wasn't doing us any favors at that time. And maybe that's another thing that still applies. But that's what ultimately led to us is we lost sight of what mattered. And we lost touch with what was really happening on the ground. And I Jason, I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I think from Jump Street, that was the case in Afghanistan, as you said. And then I would ask, we seem hell-bent on trying to establish democracies that look like us, even with cultures that probably aren't, that isn't the right answer for them.
Right.
And I have to wonder, we, as you know, we relegated all the warlords to marginalize them as quickly as we could because they weren't in our view what a democracy would look like. Although they'd been there their whole lives, knew everyone, knew the connections and how that part of the world worked, and we got rid of all of them. I just wonder if we'd empowered a different way and created our own force, could it have been different?
Use the warlords to your advantage as opposed to subjugating them?
More that model. I know it's a very simple statement and there's all kinds of problems with it, but that's what I wonder.
Gotcha. So, Jason, do you think that this would be considered our modern day Vietnam in terms of 20 years worth of men, resources? I say men, I apologize, men and women, resources, money spent, and ultimately for what?
Yeah, I take a much longer view of war than most people do. I look at war in a 50 or 100 year mechanism. I don't think it makes sense to look at it in right when a war ends. This is what happened. If you go to Vietnam right now, who do they have a defense contract with? Who do they do a ton of trade with? Are they communists or actually they're pretty much capitalist? Is religion now free even though it was banned? Yeah. Vietnam is actually a cultural victory for the West. They are actually afraid of China now. They're old, they're leaning towards the West and pushing towards the West. So I always look at wars, give me 75 years later. World War II, definitely a win. Germany, still free democracy. Italy, not fascist. Japan, one of our best allies in the world. So I think you have to look at it. We won't know the truth about Afghanistan or Iraq or Somalia, or we won't know until 75 years, because that societal impact that Americans had in Vietnam actually kind of put a bug in the system. And long after we left, that those cultural bugs just rattled around for decades, and it shifted the whole culture and society away from where they were going. They were taken over by communists and then rejected themselves. So I don't know what's going to happen in Afghanistan, but I think it's an easier way to look at a war. It's not worth trying to figure out what we won or lose at the moment. It's what those people do in the next 50 years that really matters, because we don't know. If we took the troops out of South Korea tomorrow, would North Korea invade and take over the South? Possibly. Would we then go, that was our Vietnam? It doesn't really make sense. We stayed there for 70 years. We kept it a democracy. If we walked out tomorrow and it folded and they couldn't keep the North out, probably the North would become democratic real quick when they got to the South and were like, look at all this food. Right. This is awesome. So I look at it differently. I just don't like to put the labels on what we're doing at this moment in time, because it doesn't do any good, really. Only our grandkids and great grandkids will be able to say, this happened here, and this is the real result, the generational shift of what happened in that country.
Then by that sentiment, Jason, how do you, someone who's been tied to this for the better part of 2 decades and deeply tied to this, how do you feel then? I mean, do you feel as though progress has been made on in that kind of same breath of what you're talking about? Do you feel as though 15, 20 years from now, you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, damn, yeah, things we planted a bug and we really forced a shift? I mean, ultimately, how do you feel about it versus emotionally, I guess, more than intellectually?
This morning, the president kind of handed off the reins, and they announced they were going to transition to a transitional government of Afghan elders, and that's what it was on my phone this morning when I woke up real early. I knew it was coming, but, I just felt betrayed. I felt as if America and NATO had betrayed Afghanistan. We told them, when I got there in 2002, Afghans did not trust us because we had abandoned them in the 1990s. Lock, stock, and barrel, left them to deal with the fallout of our messing around to shoot the Soviets, right? So they were very shy. They said, you're going to have to earn our trust. And it took me 19 years to earn the trust of Afghans, really. The stuff I was hearing from Afghans at the end here, they were just like, thank you for being a good friend to Afghanistan. There were few of you. It was hard to build trust, and it took me 19 years of constant communication. So I just personally, emotionally felt betrayed this morning that we just said, hey, we told you could trust us, but we were lying. We were going to leave you and Pakistan with the upper hand. So good luck with that, because that's what the final message was from this administration. We're out of here. Good luck with that.
Do you think another year, another 2, another 3 or 4 or 5 would make a difference?
We were making a difference with 2,500 people on the ground for years, and we weren't getting casualties. We weren't spending as much money. I think we could have stayed there. If you look at Colombia and South America, a great example, we could have stayed there with the right footprint and kept Pakistan from getting engaged, because they don't want to be at war with us either, for decades. Just like we have done in Korea. We could have been that little bit, and meant with 10% of the troops that are in Korea. That's a pretty good cost saving. So most Americans didn't even know we were still in Afghanistan. I think we could have had a very small subset of the right people and kept the Taliban off balance until they got tired of fighting, and at least had a better negotiation. But by just saying, the hell with it, we're out of here, it was the 9th inning. We had a few runs up on the enemy, and we just said, you know what? We're going to take the team and leave the stadium. So
why do you think that is?
You win. Why?
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of this is political promises. There's no appetite in America for soldiers to be deployed anywhere, although we're in 120 countries right now. Most people just don't know about it. But there's no appetite for us to be in a place. I kind of told the Afghans a long time ago, you're not going to be South Korea. No one wants to do that again. That was 70 years ago. And most Americans don't know we have troops there. But no one had the stomach to do it again. And so you had the Trump hardcore party, part of his party wanted isolationism. You had almost the whole Democratic Party moving towards isolationism. And so this was kind of a perfect storm to have 2 back-to-back administrations that said, I don't give a shit. My people want me home. I'm sorry. Are you guys cuss on this channel?
Absolutely.
Every fucking time.
I didn't want to get that wrong. Damn bitch.
We get that E on our podcast pretty quick.
Right out of the gate.
Not friendly, family friendly programming here.
It depends on your family.
I think it was just perfect storm. Two political parties back to back that didn't want to be at war anymore, and so it was a safe bet for Trump or Biden could have said it. That's it. I'm out of here. It's going to hurt him for a while. He might not get reelected if he's alive to run for election again. But, in the end, it's not going to stick to him.
I'm going to play the ignorant ass American just for a second here, Jason, and put you on the spot. Why, if I'm that person, why should we be the global police? I don't want our troops there. And what's the benefit of me leaving 2,500, 2,000, 3,000 troops? Because if anything happens and then suddenly it's like, well, let's put 5, let's put 10, you know what I'm saying? So if I'm that person going, why should we expend any resources? And I know what you're saying is you could have done it with a minimal of force. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have gone back and forth on that question throughout my life, this global policeman thing. But if you want to be a superpower, you have to play in the world. I use the analogy when I talk to college students. I say, look, the world is a neighborhood. At one end of your street, you can have a crack house, and across from it, you can have a meth house. But eventually, if you don't do something about that crack house and that meth house, they're going to keep moving down the street. Then your windows are going to get shot out. And eventually, when that neighborhood catches on fire, you're all going to burn. Because when you see something that's wrong, you have to stand up to it. When you see a bully on a playground, what did they teach our generation? You go knock the bully out so that the innocent kids are okay. And if as a country you don't want to go beat up the bully, or at least stand and tell the bully you're a bully, and if you go any farther, I'm going to kick you in the fucking head. If you're not willing to do that, you're not a superpower. You shouldn't even want to be. Don't step up and say we're the greatest country in the world. We'll help take care of the world. We want the world to improve. If you're not willing to do anything, then just shut up, because you're not going to do anything. And they know that. China knows that now. They just watch this. Just like Somalia and us pulling our troops out when we got a bloody nose, that inspired Al Qaeda to launch September 11th. You know what? We can probably attack their homeland and they won't do anything. Now, we surprised them. We actually did come out and go to Afghanistan and hunt them down. But I just like to take it down to the individual level. If you're not willing to do something, don't raise your voice, because a bully will test you. And if you're not willing to punch that bully, you better just stay at the table and let them beat up that little kid.
And you don't get to pick and choose your moments to stand up. You either do it all the time or you shut up and you sit down.
Yeah, we're in 120 countries with our military right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Sure, those countries don't fall down into anarchy and become the next Al Qaeda hotspot.
Well, I was talking to my wife about this before the show, and her thing was referencing the global policing is by doing what we've now done and giving that country over to the Taliban, have we not just given them a stronghold where they can hunker down, game plan? Nobody's going in and doing anything about it now, because once you pull those people out, what's the incentive? What's the military action to try to then go back in and resolve an issue if you, God forbid, had to?
And not only that, it's can we we just play the long game with America, right? Right. We'll wait them out.
We'll wait till the next September 11th. It takes those kind of events to make us really get off our butts sometimes when it's hard, and Afghanistan's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to even get in there. It's a landlocked country. I mean, Dave knows how hard it is to get in there.
The Soviets figured that out in the 70s and 80s. So
yeah. I mean, the old adage about Afghanistan is it's where superpowers go to die, or something to that effect, because it is completely landlocked. And it should be noted, like, if the United States stays or goes, everybody else will follow. And a lot of it has to do with simple logistics and the willingness to put treasure towards a problem. And so, we created the scenario of making the decision to pull out, and no other country was going to stay. So that was, that's what led to basically everybody in, everybody out kind of thing. But, I guess, I agree with a lot of what you're saying there, Jason. And I'm kind of wondering, it's a bit of, I do wonder what happens next. I feel like Iraq is in a very different place because they were a little more cosmopolitan. They have natural resources. Like they had an innate desire to not be oppressed. And I wonder, what is in that ether in Afghanistan now of like, what do the Afghan people want? How is that going to gel with the Taliban, who's had 20 years out of power, now coming back in going, the people really don't like being oppressed that much. They kind of liked hearing music and dancing and, other things.
I just had that conversation this week. Actually, the last 4 months, I've been working for the United States Institute of Peace with some other diplomats, and we've been talking to different Afghans. And our discussion was, in the future, when there is a peace agreement of some sort, however, the fighters on both sides have to come home and become part of society. Will you forgive them? If you're an Afghan, and your police officer's son was tortured by the Taliban, will you forgive the Taliban? Vice versa, will the Taliban be able to ever forgive the Afghans who were hunting them? And I was blown away, speaking of that ether, of the ability of Afghans to forgive. And I've seen it many times when we screwed up and they forgave us. Many people said, look, all those warlords that we didn't know what to do with after the Civil War, eventually they did put on suits and join the government in some way, shape, or form. They gave up what they were doing, became a minister of this or a governor of that, or, joined to run the police force. The Minister of Defense right now is a former warlord. He had his suit on in 3 different jobs. So they said, you know what? The Taliban might moderate. This is Afghanistan. Weird things happen. Like they may, just like the warlords did, eventually go, well, as Dave said, people really hate us. If we don't change a little bit, they might come slit our throats in the palace, because Afghans have been known to go slit people's throats in the palace. So I don't know if anybody knows. I've always said only Afghans will know how this ends eventually. And so I think that's where we're in that zone right now. And my WhatsApp's just blowing up with people going, I'm here, or I got out, or I'm been, or I'm trying to set up an insurgency group. I mean, there could be a full resistance force that comes back in next week from Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, who's just going around killing groups of 200 Taliban that are trying to secure a city, because the Taliban are spread real thin and nobody likes them. So who knows? This is choose your own adventure book here.
But I know you mentioned we really won't know the effects of this to 40, 50, 60 years down the road, when we can look back and say, okay, how did things fall out? Yeah. But you made a point early on, and it's a point I want to circle back to, is Pakistan. And if they're controlling, if they're the puppet master and nobody's dealing with them in 50 years, does anything change?
Yeah, I think unless the world takes a stand on Pakistan, things won't change much in Afghanistan. But Afghans, I've been listening to some interesting chatter. There are some Afghans who are now ready to go in and start killing the intelligence agents in Pakistan that have been running this. We could see an insurgency in Pakistan that looks a lot like the one they just did to Afghanistan. And all of a sudden, the Pakistani military is trying to figure out how to hold on to their country, because there's these crazy insurgent groups that are trying to break away 2 of the 4 provinces. 2 provinces of Pakistan don't want to be part of that. If they were a state, if they're a United States of 4 places, there's 2 of them that don't want to be part of Pakistan. I think the Afghans could spend a little bit of money and break those 2 away, and Afghanistan gets bigger and Pakistan ceases to exist. It's crazy time. We have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that known as like the federally administered? It's
the Fatah.
The Fatah, yeah.
FATA. I think it's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or something nowadays, but it's basically all the Pashtuns, which are one of the big tribes of Afghanistan, are Pashtuns. There are more Pashtuns living in Pakistan than there are in Afghanistan. So that whole group of Pashtuns actually just wants to be Afghan and leave Pakistan. So that's also part of Pakistan's calculus. How do I keep this humongous group of people that live next to Afghanistan from just leaving my country and setting up a border between me and the capital? That's why Pakistan's really paranoid right now, and they should be. Baluchistan is the largest province of Afghanistan. It has the big ocean side on the bottom. They don't want to be part of Pakistan. They hate Pakistan. So they want to break away. So you could see some really curious things coming if Afghanistan wants to get a little revenge. It's South Asia. Things happen.
Does the United States stay involved in the region?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I when I saw the ambassador got on a plane today and took the flag with him, I have a funny feeling this was us washing our hands and hoping Pakistan doesn't lose their nukes. But I think this is us trying to stop dealing with South Asia and Central Asia as much as we have been.
And so that kind of brings the question I wanted to ask. It's kind of a scary question to ask, but what do you think it would take for the United States to get involved in dealing with Pakistan? Would it be another September 11th or something that dramatic? It would have to be. I
think so, unless unless Congress gets busy and starts exposing what Pakistan's been doing and pushes us. I don't think we'll do much to Pakistan unless there's another September 11th type attack somewhere against us or our allies of that level, and it emanates from that area. Because now Pakistan owns Afghanistan. They're now responsible for any trouble that happens there. They wanted it. Now they got it. So Pakistan's may get more than they wanted.
It's funny. We were using that quote with Colin Powell about Iraq when he said, if you break it, you buy it.
Yep.
The phrase applies to
they just bought it.
Yeah. I mean, if you create this monster, then and it's certainly, like you said, I mean, there's the best laid plans, right? Or what is it? Man plans, God laughs, and the other ironic statement that came to mind during all this is there may be a silver lining despite our best efforts.
Right.
I think that's what Vietnam was, I mean, all these intentions of Vietnam, and in the end, it was just the French and the Americans living there for 20, 30 years that put this virus in the culture that actually shifted the whole damn country eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
So we just need to start having people move over there and just live naturally. And I think that's what I just heard. That's
you can be the first. You can be the first one, sir.
They just need Afghanistan's Greatest American Idol program type show in there, and
American Idol.
They have
Afghanistan.
one.
Oh my God!
Afghanistan's got talent. I mean, that's
well, and we've talked about pain thresholds of people or culture or society. I think it's also, there's something to be said in the midst of all this of the human spirit. Like, we don't innately want to be oppressed or to go without things that make us happy, and that that genie's out of the bottle in many respects, and again, I think the Taliban has to be cognizant of that. Just what they've seen and what they know the people will want. And
absolutely,
there's a modern take on Sharia law or something like that.
I mean, it's 20 years later. Information is shared so freely. I mean, groups of people, cultures now have shifted and can now communicate their oppression or their glee of the fact that they get to dress the way they want to dress or dance the way they want to dance or whatever. I mean, this isn't our grandfathers 20 years ago, right? I guess there's probably a better way to say that, but there's been cultural shifts in the last 20 years, I think, that allow for this to end very differently than maybe we even thought going into it 20 years ago.
But do those people in Afghanistan have the access to that information? I mean, in North Korea, they don't.
The Taliban turned it off.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So now that's just a level of control. Jason, I don't remember.
The question is, will the people then stand up and say, okay, you know what? Fuck that. We've had America's Got Talent and we want to keep it. And will they rise up and stand against
Afghanistan's got talent.
Afghanistan's got talent.
Still AGT.
Yeah, still AGT. Fair enough.
I saw that this morning. Absolutely. One of my friends who's a professor over there, a young woman. She tweeted publicly, openly, and she's in Kabul. She's like, "We've had it, and we will get it back."
And that's what it's going to take, I think. Right? Yeah.
There's a woman who might be the first insurgent leader. Coming.
But you said. I don't remember exactly, but I think you said, hundreds of thousands, maybe women just got locked in their homes. Like, what oppression occurs now that this incident has happened and we're pulling out? Like, what kind of oppression is going to occur? Is there going to be genocide? Is there going to be brutal oppression in that country until something does happen, until there is a rise up?
Yeah, what we've seen so far, basically they had some kill lists. They were looking for journalists. They wanted to silence down. They're looking for anybody who been an interpreter for us, which is why everybody was pushing so hard to get interpreters out. Outspoken women, I helped many outspoken women get their visas in the last few days and get to a safe country. They had a list of people they had to silence. and they were going, and they've got away with that. I mean, they've literally been wandering around for the last couple of weeks, going city to city, pulling people out of their houses and murdering them. So the atrocities are already happening. I just don't think they're going to go to a great scale because they don't want an intervention. You know, the UN could actually get off its butt and send a peacekeeping force in there and say, no, if you're going to just murder everybody and genocide, you know, we're going to retake the city. There's not many of you. We know this. And then sanction Pakistan finally and do something about it. But I think it's going to be low threshold, but it might be enough to make the Afghans want to throw them off and hunt them down. I mean, they don't have secure control of the country. This is dudes flying around in pickup trucks. This isn't an organized army that's, you know, running this in a very organized manner.
You know, if you, Thor, I'll just go to throw in a question. You know, it makes me think of, you know, I heard this refrain in Iraq a couple of times of like, things were better under Saddam. And what they mean was their life was simpler. Now, whether it was good or not is a separate discussion. You know, it's easier, and this is relative, being the insurgent seeking power. But once you're in power, now you have to lead. Now you have to lead and deliver. Yep. And I can't imagine they're going to be able to lead using the same fear tactics that existed prior, which is how they maintain power. That's what I wonder if it'll erode away. And now the Taliban actually is going to have to start delivering on, oh, I don't know, electricity, water, infrastructure.
The things they've been destroying for 20 years. They literally put out a memo yesterday, like, do not destroy any more bridges, any more water, any more power. Like, we're going to need that stuff. We think we're going to win. So stop destroying everything we've been destroying for 19 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to wonder if that doesn't happen. And like you said, 6 months, a year, people are like, you know, don't have my freedoms. I'm being oppressed. I'm hungry. We have no economy. You know, nobody will trade with us. So, yeah, which I'm sorry, Thor, I know I'm delaying your question,
That's
but
fine.
In terms of economy, I mean, other than poppies, lapis, you know, figs, that kind of thing, I mean, what are they going to be able to rely on?
Yeah, they've got the precious stones industry is really deep. Copper, there's a little bit of oil and gas. There's a lot of people who have been wanting to go invest and get it out of the ground in Afghanistan for a decade now, but didn't want to take the risk. So I don't think anybody's going to look at the Taliban government and go, that looks more stable.
Yeah,
I'll take the risk now and invest in setting up that copper mine. So they're going to be hurting on money. And that's what the international community, the diplomats, the UN, NATO, European Union, that's what they think has been their leverage all along. But the Taliban will come in, they'll have to moderate because they're going to need our money. Now, they might be able to just creep along with their opium sales. That's in the billions already. And China might give them money because they don't want the UN to have leverage there. We don't know yet, but they're going to need money somehow. So either they play nice and work with the international community, or they rob, steal, and pillage, and life gets really crappy.
Damn. In case you missed it, I just want to say, while most of us were spending our weekends just relaxing and enjoying ourselves, Jason was helping outspoken women get visas to get the fuck out of a war-torn country to save their lives. So
Yeah,
how's that for
amazing,
right? I mean, how's that for a reality check in terms of what you're doing? Do we run the risk, though, of everything that you're saying? Do we run the risk, Grinch, you're talking about, oh, well, people will eventually get tired of not having their freedoms or not having this and that. Do we run the risk of Pakistan stepping in and exerting control over the situation? Like if the Taliban starts to, if insurgents rise up, Pakistan going, oh, well, we'll just put military on the ground.
That would be an interesting one. Afghans by nature hate Pakistanis. So that would be an interesting conundrum if Pakistan said, well, we'll send some troops over the border because we're being invited by the government to help, you know, secure Kandahar or, you know, secure this city, and then all of a sudden you got Pakistani troops on the ground. They have American, you know, Pakistan's got talent too. Their country's not going to be too excited about a military deployment outside of their borders. And so you could see a really nasty coup happening in Pakistan, which, by the way, is, I think, never had a real election. Pakistan's always been one coup after another. Military takes over, civilian takes over, military takes over. People get assassinated. It's fascinating to look at how each Pakistani administration ends. It's not good. So I think this is their first elected guy who may be able to pass it on to someone else.
But is it a solid system of control? Like if it is somebody getting elected, is it somebody that can stay in power?
Yeah, the military runs the country, so they put their person in power if it's not them. I mean, literally, if it's not the general taking over, then they put in their elected civilian that they want, and they protect them until they don't want them.
So ultimately, what we've discerned from this entire conversation is, regardless of what's happened today, we'll never know the effects of this until years down the road to see how all of this plays out. Does the fact that the Soviets were in there in 79, spent almost 10 years in that country fighting a war, and then where the country ended up 30 years, 40 years later, or whatever, does that not paint us a picture? I mean, I guess because Grinch, you made the analysis to Vietnam. The French were in Vietnam before us, accomplished nothing. Did we learn? No. We went into Vietnam, thought, well, we'll do it better. And we clearly didn't. And then the Russians were in Afghanistan, couldn't get it done. Now we're in there. So again, I guess ultimately we're not learning either from our predecessors or previous situations. So that's a ridiculous learning curve.
I mean, I given this some thought, two trains of thought on this topic. One is, war was clearer going back to World War II, maybe Korea, in terms of what the objective was, what you were there to do, and then knowing what the end looked like. We went into Afghanistan because of 9/11, largely accomplished what we set out to do. And then that kind of kicked off the term that started circulating under, George Bush, and then continued on, which was the nation building. I think the problem with Americans is we don't think strategically and long. We think year to year or administration to administration. And so those are what drive our decisions, not a strategic vision that's in the best interest of America. It's based on whatever politics are on the ground. And that's, I assume that is not lost on anybody, a China, a Russia, et cetera, as they look at America. Because we may think we know what we want to do to begin with, but then we lose sight of it. And then I think the other train of thought on that is similar, which is it begs the question of going forward. Like I'm leery of the statement, study history lest you be doomed to repeat it, but it's not that there aren't lessons there. And where I'm going with that is the Afghanistan of today is not even the Afghanistan that we started with, which is not the Afghanistan under the Soviets. And I don't think we know. I think the rapidity and the potential of change is accelerated now with access to information. I mean, you can set up your own satellite dish now in the middle of nowhere and get the internet. So you can turn off certain capabilities, phone networks, you can manage the news, but if people want information, they're going to find a way to do it, to get access to it. And I think now that pipeline is there, they've had the exposure to things. Like I said, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Now that's the new norm that they've got to move forward with. And I don't even know if the Taliban knows what they want it to look like.
I think that raises a really good point that a lot of Afghans have been making me over the last couple of months. Whenever they have these little ceasefires every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 days, maybe a week, where they weren't fighting. And at first, the first couple of ceasefires, the Taliban fighters, the young kids, right, 19-year-old kids, were allowed to go in the villages and see their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles, their family, and hang out with other young kids. And most of them didn't go back to fight. So begs the question, now the Taliban saying, we're in charge of the country. Look at all our fighters. We're in charge. And all these kids are like going, hey, that's a girl over there. I ain't seen one of those in 20 years. You think I could date her? Well, right. She said I got to get a shower, shave my beard a little bit, get cleaned up, quit acting like a thug. Oh, shit, I better do some of that if I'm going to get married. Like, even the Taliban doesn't understand what they just let their 19-year-old fighters get in the middle of, which is the modern world. And half these kids are probably be like, yeah, I'm not showing up for the formation next, boss. I done found the girl I want to
I'm going to get laid.
Hey.
I just, these kids showed me like what it's like to own a car, and I want my own now instead of riding in the pickup truck with these other smelly dudes. Like,
yeah,
we've basically Americanized them, right?
You
know, which
the
maybe
Taliban
might be
and that's another thing that is not lost, I think, on the rest of the world is our culture is powerful. It's rough, it's cowboyish, it's got all kinds of problems, but it's contagious.
Yep.
And I'll use North Korea. Like North Korea knows. They absolutely know. Any inkling of that gets over, and it's all over.
Game over.
2 seconds.
Yeah.
Democracy. That's it.
So then I figured out the problem. This is what we do. We put a bunch of aircraft in the air and we just drop, like, instead of leaflets, we just drop Taylor Swift CDs. Once they hear that shit,
There you go.
fucking problem solved.
You got to ease them into it. David Hasselhoff first.
The Hoff, yeah. Probably should start with the male singer, huh?
That's it. Obviously, Jason, before we wind down to the end here, I want to ask you 2 questions. So I'll ask the first one. We're pulling out of Afghanistan. The last of the allies, the interpreters, obviously the president's been removed from the country. What is, at this moment, what is the worst case scenario moving forward for Afghanistan, our approach to Afghanistan, that region, and in general? What's the worst case scenario that happens moving forward?
Worst case scenario is a mass killing, that the Taliban decide to just take revenge and not just in prison, but just start killing everybody that might be a problem in a bid to really try to put their arms around all of the culture that may corrupt them and anybody who might fight against them. It would be just a mass, retribution killing. I think that's worst case scenario.
And does that force our hand to step back into the situation?
I do not think this president would do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And again,
I guess can you, as soon as you step out, what does it take to have to step back in and say, oops, my bad, we were wrong? I don't know. That's a tough call to make.
Yeah, it wouldn't take many people. It would just take our leadership. But I truly think we just washed our hands of it. President Biden, I saw him there as a senator, as a vice president. He did not like Afghans or get along with any Afghans. He was the ugly American, would literally walk out of meetings, storm out of dinners, cuss and scream and just walk out of rooms if he was upset with them. I had no doubts what he would do with the power of the presidency.
Wow, that's kind of crazy because you just,
it's personal for him.
Clearly, I don't know the guy, right? I don't play cards with him, but that's not the impression you get, at least.
Don't? It's weird. I would have.
No, we play Uno, which I guess is still a card game, but
draw 4, bitch.
We're Americans. We play checkers.
Yes.
But was it
that's interesting.
Was it the right thing to do? I mean, 4 administrations, we get to his, nobody has managed the situation correctly. And I know you said early on, Pakistan was the problem. We were always focused on the wrong person. So was Biden's approach the right approach? I know, I believe your answer would be no.
I wouldn't even say right or wrong. I just think he didn't want to even look at the approaches. He had us I was part of these study groups and come up with different ways that we could do it. And everybody, no matter what anybody said, he just said, nah, I don't think so. I mean, he had already made his mind up when he came in. He was leaving, and he had said that, which I believed him. That's why I told the Afghans, oh, we're leaving. Lock, stock, and barrel. Get ready. We are abandoning you. Sorry.
Book your flights now.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was right or wrong. It was just his decision. Right or wrong will come 50 years from now. I personally think it was a pretty cowardly way to do it. You could have done it another way. We could have exerted pressure on Pakistan and actually stood up and said, all right, for once, we're going to take on the bully. And I'm Biden, and I like to take on bullies. I think he could have got away with that. I think his gravitas and his reputation, he could have gotten away with it. And Pakistan would have went, shit, all right, you're calling us on it. We'll stand down. We'll actually let negotiations happen as they should and take our fingers off the scales. And maybe we could have had a different, he just didn't want to try anything. He just said, I'm done.
Sitting at
so
the
right or
table.
wrong comes, but the historians get to grade that one.
Right. Well, and again, because you made the point, look at Vietnam. I mean, we spent 10 years there, and then, obviously we could not fight a war against Ho Chi Minh and Northern Vietnam. But like you said, 60 years later, look at where the culture's at in the country. It changed over time, the Western influence. Yeah. Maybe him pulling out, and I'm sure people probably derided Nixon at the time, going, that's a mistake. You don't pull out, we're giving up the fight. And then here we are 60 years later, and they're trending in the right direction. So maybe him pulling out is the best thing. I don't know.
Can we say pulling out anymore in this episode? Because
I'm trying not to
getting moist in some intimate areas here, buddy.
So that's going to lead me to my next question, Jason.
Leaving the back door open.
He doesn't.
He doesn't.
All about that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh,
have
Lord,
you been
here we
listening to
go.
our show? So that's going to lead me to my next
Grinch, you
question.
had one job, was to tell them that we don't talk about anal play and butt plugs when Jason's on the show.
I knew you wouldn't listen.
That's right. What's best case scenario then? If that's worst case, what's best case scenario now that we're pulling out of the country?
Best case scenario, the Taliban comes in. They do have some kind of shared government. They allow they don't want an insurgency, just like, they could. This is Afghanistan. I mean, stuff happens there you couldn't even imagine could happen. So they could all sit down in a room and agree to some kind of power sharing agreement. A former president and a former foreign minister and, vice president are negotiating this. They could agree to some power sharing deal where they do respect human rights and they do respect women's rights, and things change a little bit, but they do start to moderate. And in 5 years, they lose all their fighters and there is no more Taliban militia because they all wanted to go to college and get laid and get a job and have a life and have kids. And it could start going in the right direction. We have no idea. And it could cost a lot of civilian lives in the meantime. And that's the risk.
Right.
I'm trying to remember, Taliban are Sunni or are they Shia?
Sunni.
Sunni.
They kill Shia for breakfast.
Right.
Yeah, they're really anti-Shia, ruthless. They've done a lot of genocides on the Shia in their country.
And what I'm wondering is, and I don't know who's connected to who in this regard. I mean, we have seen some moderation in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, for example, allowing women to drive, things like that. Do you think there's any, I hate to use the term bleed over, but I'm not meaning it in the fighting sense. Do you think there's any of that influence that may spill over in the broader Sunni spectrum?
It could. They're just connected to the worst Sunnis in the world.
Yeah.
They're connected with the most radical ones. Even their connections to Saudi Arabia, which are the radical Saudis. So, Qatar's their best buddy, Pakistan their best buddy. I mean, unfortunately they're connected to the wrong folks to moderate them. But if those countries wanted to do something, which they've refused to do, I told the Trump administration that you've got to involve the Muslim countries to moderate these other folks. We can't do it. We're not even Muslim. They're not going to listen to us. Those countries are pretty lazy about helping moderate the other countries. So it could be something though. I think there's just a moderation in general. More and more kids are leaving religion in every religion. So I think there is either a moderate or lose your flock thing going on in religions. So that will be at play as well.
I did want to ask, Grinch mentioned this before you came on. It's our understanding you have written a number of books about Afghanistan. 1, 2, I'm not exactly sure.
Well, not specifically Afghanistan. One was about leadership and one was the Quran.
Yes, that's the one. Apparently you did something with the Quran where you translated it, reordered it. Is that?
Yeah, I interpreted into modern English and reordered it chronologically. It's a 23-year story, so you could read it like the Bible is pretty chronological. I just wanted to put it in that sequence to help you understand it.
And I wanted to ask about that one specifically. Did that irritate anybody that followed the Quran religiously? No pun intended. Like diehard followers of the Quran, like reordering it in that way, altering it in that way. I know you didn't change it. You just reordered it. Did that irritate people? Like, was there any blowback from that?
Yeah, there's 0.001% of Muslims in the world that would care about that. I'm the 100th person to put it into English, literally.
Oh, okay.
I talked to a Duke scholar that lives up the road from me. He's like, yeah, you're probably about the 100th guy. He wrote the book on all the English translations. I am the first soldier, so I get a bookmark in history there. But and putting it in that order is known to all Muslim scholars. We know this order, so reordering it has happened in other editions before as well. So actually, I've got calls from all over the world from Muslim scholars at Quranic institutes who are studying my book and talking about it and comparing it to other ones and doing their PhD dissertations on it and doing thesis on it. I got a call from Iran literally 2 months ago to speak at an Iranian Quranic scholarly institution and talk about why I did it and how I did it. And they're setting up a time for me to speak at this Islamic college in Iran.
Damn.
America's, the great Satan, but Jason, that's actually really cool what you did. So we'd love to have you come speak to us. And we were communicating in English because our culture is there too. So
there you go.
No, nobody really, a few haters, but if you write anything, you get haters.
And what was the other book that you wrote?
I did recently just did a book on my 30 years of leadership lessons from being in the Army, being around policy making. And so it's called Leaders Always Go a Little Further. And it's just it's a bunch of little chapters and stories and vignettes about leadership lessons that run the gamut. And so that was kind of my opus of putting all my lessons together for young people, to kind of a graduation gift type book.
So now when you step into a presidential room, a room with the president and his cabinet, and you guys are talking about game plans for our country, do you just hand that book across the table, go, look, just read that, get your shit together?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I just send them, I just tweet them the link. I'm like, yo, I know you're following me. So here's the link to my book, Prez. You should read this. Chapter 3, you need a lot of that.
Let's educate yourself.
You always find a way to go, as I wrote in my book.
That'd be nice to be able to say it that way, right? I wrote in my book. You should check it out. Yeah, it's absolutely been insightful. I do appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, there is a shit ton, obviously, to unpack, but the history of what you've done, both of you, Jason, Grinch, but both of you serving in the military, being in the 82nd Airborne, being in Afghanistan at the start of this, watching on a different level than obviously what the rest of us probably have. I think it's interesting, Grinch, when you and I talked about it, you're like, we were in Afghanistan and then Iraq kicked off, and basically the world forgot that Afghanistan existed because Iraq became the focus. Yep. And now you're looking at it almost 20 years later and people are going, we're still in Afghanistan?
And if I remember right, Jason, weren't we both there at the time when that happened?
I was there. Yeah,
because you were up
watching
in
TV, going, "Hey, we're invading Iraq."
Because you were in Bagram at the time.
I was in Kabul at the embassy.
Kabul. Okay.
Yep. 2 doors down from the ambassador, watching TV.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like sitting in Afghanistan, watching the invasion of Iraq, and then going, "How long are we staying?" A little longer, you say.
I don't think we're getting reinforcements, guys. It's on us.
Yeah. Well, Grinch, that's the point you made. Like there's a finite amount of resources. And then when Iraq comes online, those resources have to come from somewhere, either whatever you're taking from the States or what's already in country there. And so obviously that changes the dynamic of the region.
Yeah.
How you deal with things.
I mean, I will say this is another topic I've given a lot of thought to, is when you're not resource constrained, you tend to have the luxury of poor strategy that you somehow still muddle along. And in the case of the United States, I mean, we, as we talked about, I think yesterday, I mean, $1 trillion, right? I mean, to think of, like, I think our infrastructure bill, was it like 3 trillion or is it 1 trillion, whatever it was, 3 trillion. I mean, that's a third of our entire nation's infrastructure bill that is going forward. And not to mention the countless lives that have been affected, both on, the Afghan side and everybody associated with it, all the nations that have been there. I mean, there's a tremendous human toll that we'll never know all their stories, but it just kind of settles into history, and like we said, we started with one small mission, if you will. Took us a little longer to get in there because it's a fucking hard country. 20 years later, here we are. And I mean, I've told people this story, but, and Jason certainly knows this, but my daughter was born when I was there the first time, and I took her to college yesterday. Like that puts it in a really weird perspective for me when I think about it.
That's an arc for you.
I do want to mention one thing that's coming out, and maybe you can have this guy on to talk about it. But a buddy of mine, Tim Torres, nickname's Tito, grew up in Ranger Regiment, spent his whole life growing up in Afghanistan. I think he had 14 tours or something ridiculous like that.
Wow.
He's right now, he's a Pat Tillman scholar at Georgetown, working on his master's degree. And he reached out to me. He and I worked on some of the same projects over the years. He said, Jason, I want to start a website, a blog, an online magazine where Afghans and Americans can write about their stories together, their bonds they built, or going to each other's country and what they learned from each other, regardless of how this ends. A place where, and I mean, it's writing therapy. I started my blog this morning that I'm going to post on there. And he asked me to come on and be the senior editor and put an editing team together. And so an Afghan and American editing team to just get those stories and capture them. Because I think those stories are probably what's more important. We won't know if this is right or wrong or how this ends for 50 years, but the experiences people had, I think it's good for them to share those with people. So I'm going to be pretty proud to be working on that for the next decade, at least, to get those stories captured and to share them, because there was a lot of love and compassion and empathy and comradeship, just built over the years. And I think it's worth capturing that.
Would you like to plug your blog? I don't know if it's up and running yet. I know you.
I don't think it's gone online. It's going to be called A Voice for Two Nations.
Okay.
So we'll throw it out there when it comes out. I'll let Dave know about it.
Yeah, definitely, because I'll definitely plug it.
Capture those stories and share them with the world. Let people learn more.
It's amazing.
Our press didn't really cover it much. Like Dave said, everybody woke up today and go, "Oh, we're leaving Afghanistan? I didn't know we were there."
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah.
Well, the Obama administration told we were done. We were done fighting, right?
Well, how did you think Pakistan wasn't an issue? Wasn't the red flag the fact that they were housing bin Laden? I mean, shouldn't that have been a red flag? I love his little, for those of you that can't see it, the look on his face was fucking priceless.
Yeah.
That
you're living in Abbottabad.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, Jason, you mentioned that one vignette. It just so happens I listened to a little bit of a Joe Rogan podcast the other day with Evan Hafer, who's one of the president or owner of Black Rifle Coffee. And he told the story of one of his interpreters and how he thought he had been killed in 2016. And he got contacted by him in like 2018. He was in Baltimore, had managed to get out of the country because he was running for his life.
Yep.
Reached out via Facebook. Evan told him, get your family on a plane. You're flying out here to Salt Lake City. Flew him to Salt Lake City. Found him a house, started working on getting him naturalized, through the immigration process. And now he's an employee at Black Rifle Coffee, along with a handful of other interpreters. Those are the kind of stories that warm, that's the old chicken soup for the soul kind of thing.
One last vignette on that. And I just hit publish. Well, I'm about to publish it. I started a publishing company to help veterans and Afghans write books, because I know how to write books and publish books. So I just made one. So one of the guys who approached me is a former interpreter who got out of Afghanistan on a special immigrant visa and is now a pre-med student in Oregon. And I met him because he was the interpreter for not just one of my old infantry soldiers, but two of them back to back in the same Kunar province in this horrible, tough place of Afghanistan. This guy served like 4 or 5 years in the worst spot in the world. And he was working for my old infantry privates when I was a sergeant. And they came to me and they were like, "This guy's got a story." And so I said, write a book, man. We're going to publish it. So I just sent him the final draft today. I want to, put that out there. It's called, Get the Terp Up Here. Just a story of being an infantry interpreter and what it's like to, he came over and lived with one of my former soldiers at his house, like his son, and went to college, went to high school, finished up school. He was young. And I think he snuck in when he was only 16, started interpreting, crazy stories.
Jason, I do appreciate you coming on the show. Forgive me. For those that are listening, how do you say your last name?
It's How with a K. Howk. Nothing rhymes with it.
Jason Howk is our guest today. I hope everybody has enjoyed listening. I mean, there is a ton there. Obviously, his attachment to this situation and how close he has been over the last 20 years is absolutely amazing. This was super informative. Go look for his books out there. I won't say he rewrote the Quran. He translated the Quran.
Yeah, let's not say that. That's
he rewrote it. Sorry. How's that?
Where did he go? Where did he go?
Yeah. He translated it. Now, did you say you were the first soldier to translate it?
Yeah. That was an interesting side note I didn't know. Yeah.
Okay. First soldier to translate the Quran and then reordered it into chronological order. And then his little anecdotes about what presidents should be doing when they're in war-torn countries. No, that's not what the book was. But and then obviously a publishing company you're working on and a blog, Voice of Two Nations. When that comes online, absolutely let us know. We would love to plug it. But one of the things I do want to throw out there before we close the show is if anybody is listening and you have questions about this topic, if you're sitting there going, fuck, I didn't know we were in Afghanistan. What the hell's going on or what has happened? Like, Jason, would you be willing, if we do get questions and we send them to you, I would love, just to have answers so that we can give that information to our listeners, in terms of things that they might be wondering, because I know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They'll miss it because this will come out. I'll be on CNN tomorrow at 10 a.m. talking about this. So yeah, I'm always answering questions.
There you go. CNN tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. give it a listen wherever you get your CNN.
The questions won't be as good as ours, though.
Hell no.
Guarantee you they
They're
won't be
not
talking
drinking.
about butt plugs.
You never know.
Seriously, thank you for your time, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And everything
Very
that
good.
you've done, again, like you, for some reason, the slap in the face of you saying, I'm currently helping people get visas to get them out of the country. Like, I'm thinking about how I spend my days, and then hearing that, it's like, fuck, what am I doing with my time?
Well, and just the reality of
I wonder that
We
all
have
the
to
time.
deal-
What you're doing?
You've seen the
with your
videos.
time.
You know
Oh,
what
I have
do
seen the
with my time.
videos.
Yeah. He knows what you're doing. Y'all are playing zombies together.
That's
He
right.
doesn't know. He don't wonder.
Winning. No, obviously this is a powerful topic. We do make jokes, and we don't make light of the topic, but we find a way to poke fun at each other and have a good time. But that doesn't make the topic any less important or any less impactful. But obviously, give the podcast a listen. If there are questions that you have or information that you would like to know, please reach out to spiriteddebates@gmail.com. Just drop us a line. Let us know what you think. Any questions that you might have, I will absolutely work to forward them on to Jason and get some information. It has been amazing to hear what you've done, Grinch, what you've done. I know, obviously, we've known you. We've heard the stories. We've talked over the last 20 years. But, Jason, getting your insight into who you've known and what you've done and what your perspective is has been amazing. And I do appreciate you coming on here. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to wrap up.
I thought-
Yeah. Oh, no.
No, I thought that was with the applause. Sorry.
Well, for him, not you.
You don't hear my butt cheeks clapping for you?
His cheeks.
It's like the slow clap and what is it? Not Another Teen Movie, where the guy keeps trying to start
Yes.
it.
start the slow clap. Yeah.
And then the other guy
No,
cuts him off. You
nobody?
son of a bitch.
But yeah, based on what we're talking about, if you listen to the show, this will be dropped this week. So absolutely give this a listen. When it comes out, it'll be out around Wednesday. So if you listen to the show, check it out. If we do get any questions and we feel those questions in terms of getting answers, I will release some information on our YouTube channel, A Spirited Debate. Check that out. We just dropped that. There are a couple of videos on there if you'd like to have a good laugh. But yes. So as we wrap it up, Jason, thank you. I appreciate you being here. I'd love to have you back if you're willing to come back on and share a drink with us. Maybe in 50 years, when we see where Afghanistan has ended up, we can get back together and talk.
We'll be like holograms or something.
That's
at
right.
that
I was
point.
going to say.
Yeah. So gentlemen, thank you. And then obviously, this has been great. And I can obviously, we'll close out the show, but there is something, Jason, I wanted to just mention, and based on something you said, but we'll leave it there, and I will absolutely talk to you guys next week. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Please join us week in and week out. Obviously, you can catch our episodes anywhere where you get your podcast: Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. I don't care. It doesn't matter. As long as you're listening, that's all we care about. And again, feel free to interject. Feel free to be a part of the show. Go to our website at aspiriteddebate.com. Check out our email at spiriteddebates@gmail.com. Drop us a line. Hit us with a drink. Hit us with a topic. Let us know. We'll reach out to you, see if we can get you on the show. And as always, gentlemen, we close out the show.
Salud.
Bye-bye.
Close.
Cheers.